Hey everybody, it's Sean Poole from letterstoyou.net, and we are getting ready to have a very special conversation. You just heard a bit of Bruce Springsteen's My City of Ruins, the very first public performance of that track, actually, that song. And the reason why we're playing that is because we're going to be talking about Asbury Park, the beloved adopted hometown of Bruce Springsteen, for which he originally wrote My City of Ruins, and the latest news in the ongoing struggle, the long struggle to transform Asbury Park from its past, make it a more equitable place for all of its citizens, and preserve some of its valuable history at the same time. So we've assembled a very special roundtable. We've got some very special guests. I'm going to introduce them all to you quickly. I'm going to introduce our first two guests as a duo because that's what they are. Mike Davis and Charles Day are journalists with the Asbury Park Press, where they recently worked together on the excellent Tale of Two Asburys series of articles detailing how Asbury Park's much-touted redevelopment actually has created a new layer of modern problems to add to the city's long-embedded housing segregation and inequities, and also has threatened some of Asbury Park's most historic and beloved buildings and structures with extinction. Mike and Charles, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I've struggled to try to explain these stories over the last month or so, and that's pretty good. It's
Well,
a
thanks.
pretty good nickel summary of all this stuff going on. But we're glad to be here.
Well, that's thanks to the excellent reporting that you two have done too. So, and we also have with us, of course, Lisa Iannucci, Letters to You contributing writer, longtime music journalist, activist, and Jersey Shore resident. Lisa also was a contributing writer for the beloved and now defunct Springsteen fanzine Backstreets and its website, where she filed many Springsteen-centered reports on the Jersey Shore music scene over the years. Lisa, welcome back.
Yay, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, Daniel Wolfe, writer, poet, and historian. Daniel wrote the essential book, 4th of July, Asbury Park, A History of the Promised Land, which explored in groundbreaking detail the city's first 150 years and how its struggles reflect and inform our struggles everywhere as a nation here in the U.S. Daniel, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
All right, so let's dive into this. I guess the best place to start would be with Mike and Charles. What's going on in Asbury Park these days, guys?
Oh, nothing. Really quiet. Nothing's really going on. How about you guys? Well, in summary, to go off the story that Mike and I wrote, it's been a long-standing issue, decades in the making, regarding the boardwalk and the waterfront redevelopment, and it kind of just culminated or came to a head earlier this year in January when a red sticker appeared in the carousel or the casino arcade window, and that made a lot of people worried about the demolition of the casino building. And that kind of was brewing because it's been years since 2021 when the convention hall and the Paramount Theater was closed. And in that reporting of just, okay, so what's going on? Can we get something? There was a special meeting in February with the city council kind of laying out the situation with Madison Marquette, Asbury, Starfield, aka Asbury Partners. The special meeting in February was to give an overview of why there's been a lack of action on the boardwalk. The city council held a special meeting at the Asbury Park High School, and that was to inform the public on these contracts, the situation, why the Joe Mariziti, the special redevelopment attorney for Asbury Park, believes that we can't just take back, as so many people keep saying, the casino and/or convention hall and all that. So when Mike and I started working on these stories, it was just to kind of explain the situation, do our due diligence on the reporting, and obviously through all the contracts, through all the people we were speaking with, we knew it had to be more than one story. And Mike absolutely killed it, finding the contracts, finding all the paperwork, all the documents really early in the game. And I had this idea of the Tale of Two Asbury Parks since my first year at the press, because just in my reporting on the West Side covering Asbury Park, it's no secret that the city has been broken into two by design, right down the middle with the railroad tracks. It is common, if you talk to anybody from Asbury Park, that is just part of the city. So it was an easy jumping off point, both from a technical, what's going on with the boardwalk redevelopment from the paperwork, and but also the social and cultural, what's going on with the boardwalk and the city from the community standpoint. And that's kind of where we started off. And we're here. We're not really in a different spot than we were back in February. The public is just a little bit more informed. And last week, I was at another meeting at Asbury Park High School with about 200 residents because a report came out from a retired New Jersey justice about all these documents. If we could, I'm saying we as the community, could take back the casino based off the language in the contracts. And according to Joseph Marizzi, the special redevelopment counsel for the city, they said that Tom DeSeno, a local attorney who's been saying the whole time, the city can take back the casino, not the convention hall or Paramount, but just the casino portion of the boardwalk. That he's kind of right. There's an argument to be made. The city could take that back. So we are maybe two steps forward, one step back, but there's been a little bit of progression since February.
And I mean, Daniel, I'm sure will be able to speak to this much more than I can, but to just kind of bring in the whole aspect of, I mean, this is a Springsteen fans website, so obviously the connection here is Bruce has a long history with Asbury Park. It was where he really honed himself as a musician. And as I said, it's like his adopted hometown. He's been concerned about it throughout his career. He's written about it, and he's been active, not just musically, but politically around the efforts to make Asbury Park, as you know from the song, if you listen to My City of Ruins, rise up again. And what it needs to rise up from is a long, sad history of segregation. And what people are talking about right now, or most concerned about right now, at least from the reporting of the meetings and everything, is the fact that some of the most beloved historical artifacts, buildings in Asbury Park are in great danger of being lost through this process. Daniel, obviously this isn't anything new, but what's your take on it as an historian?
Sounds familiar is my take. But mostly I want to congratulate Charles and Mike on great reporting. I mean, that story has been there a while. I don't know how they got permission to finally write about it, but it's great that it happened, and they did it in detail. They did it and are doing it very, very well. In terms of Bruce fans, just to put it in some perspective, this is the city he was born to run from. I mean, he was there because it was in ruins. You don't get to live in a surfboard factory and have clubs along the shore if your city's prospering so well. It was in fact rentable and possible for him and the rest of the E Street Band to live in the area because it had already gone downhill. And it's interesting to me because the convention center and the casino happened in 1929, got built around then, as the merchants were trying to turn Asbury into an even more glamorous tourist attraction. And with even more neglect for the West Side, as Charles talked about. So in a way, they're symbols of what went wrong with Asbury. And I think it's interesting that people want to preserve them. I understand why they do, but they aren't symbols of glory days. They're symbols of screw-ups, it seems to me.
You can forgive me the, writerly sort of a metaphor here, but in the course of writing this, I mean, like Charles, this started as a casino story. I mean, this started as, the headline at the top of a Google Doc was, "What the hell is going on with the casino?" And it grew from there because everything in Asbury Park is so linked. I mean, it's an entertainment destination. It's a seashore destination. It's a deeply, at its core, segregated community. And like any community, all of those things intertwine. So it just became the reason it expanded out is because I think if you look at Convention Hall, if you look at the casino, but really Convention Hall, because I think somebody told us in the course of our reporting, if you look at a postcard of the Jersey Shore, you're going to see Convention Hall on it. And it's sort of like a metaphor for Asbury itself, right? It's like this historic place with a deep, deep arts history. But if you look past the surface a little bit, you realize it's kind of falling apart. And if you look even deeper than that, you realize like, oh, this is going to keep falling apart unless somebody does something about it. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot getting done about it. And everything kind of just came back to the idea that like this is a city that is dealing with the same problems it has always dealt with. It has just largely found a new way to handle them. And I say new, really we're talking about decisions that were made 25 years ago. But all of the stuff that we are talking about, the things that people care about in Asbury Park today, I think can really be traced back to like that My City of Ruins era, the era where Asbury was in its darkest days. Nobody, anybody you talk to about Asbury Park will tell you, oh, I remember Asbury in the 90s when there were 12 people on the beach and everything was deserted. And it was that era where the public officials in Asbury Park made a series of decisions. And you can argue to the death whether they were good or bad for the time. But certainly in hindsight, I think the city is still reeling from a lot of those decisions that they made.
Lisa, you've lived on the Jersey Shore, just outside of Asbury, I believe, right? For this whole period, at least, right? How long have you been there?
Since 2005. So we moved basically
Okay, yeah.
Katrina, so quite a while, yeah.
So pretty close to the time when all this modern effort, if we will, the past quarter century or so of, trying to revitalize Asbury took place. What has been your experience as not just a resident, but an observer of the scene, the music scene, the culture?
Well, it depends on who you ask. I can recount, and Daniel will probably remember this. I cannot remember what the exact event was, but we were at an event at the Asbury Hotel, and the theme of it was Music Saved Asbury Park. And as you know, the Music History Foundation of Asbury sells those T-shirts. And everybody was Daniel was on a panel, and he was called upon to address that. And he questioned whether Asbury Park had been saved. And the room kind of felt quiet because the assumption is, oh yeah, it's saved. Great. Music saved Asbury Park. It's a bully for them. It's great. Nobody on the West Side thinks it's been saved. I don't think they ever thought it would be. That's
Yeah.
just my impression. As far as being a music fan, there was a period of time from maybe 2010, while The Saint was really happening, and some of the indie bands were here, and it was still relatively cheap, where it was a really fun place to be. And then the development just took off, and over a few period of years, people have been forced out through gentrification. The rents have gone up astronomically. All the musicians have pretty much moved out. Some of the original funky restaurants have moved out, which was all covered in the article. So for me, nobody I know goes there anymore. Aside from the fact that you can't park anywhere, which is a whole nother story, there's just nothing for me. It's all for an economic stratum that's far above my pay grade.
And that really came across in your reporting, Charles and Mike, that I think a lot of people at least felt, believed, hoped, wished that the deals that were cut, a quarter century ago would lead to a better Asbury Park. But as you detail, it's certainly not better for a lot of the people who live there. And it's certainly, gotten worse for people of color, especially African American citizens and residents of the town are still catching hell. And, whatever hope and dreams that would change don't seem to have happened. Now, it's interesting that you guys brought up, people talking about, oh, I've been in, I remember Asbury Park in the 90s or whatever. Daniel, as an historian, obviously, you covered Asbury from its beginnings, and Bruce Springsteen himself certainly remembers Asbury Park way beyond the 90s. We're going into the late 60s, early 70s. where Bruce's first encounters were there. And Daniel, your book covers this extensively and certainly better than I can. But I'll give a short version of the experience that Bruce had when Asbury erupted in flames. You know, due to the simmering tensions that occurred with the blatant racism of the early 70s. And you have the story of Bruce climbing up, I think it was a water tower, right, in Asbury, and watching the city burn. You can read all the history in Daniel's book, but I think what's important for Springsteen fans to remember that experience of him watching that, he talks about how it led to him changing the type of music he did, the makeup of his band. He very consciously formed a multiracial band, changed the type of music he was making. Like Steel Mill was much, more heavy metal, white boy rock, if you will. And I just think that Bruce has consciously over the years, not just because of, his experience in Asbury Park and his concern about Asbury Park, but, just experiencing racism in general in this country, has, tried to address those issues consistently in his music. And it wasn't too long ago that he played Asbury Park in the big concert on the beach. Lots of people were there. It was a really big historical moment, if you're a Springsteen fan, for him and the E Street Band to be there. And he talked about the changes he'd seen, and it was generally upbeat and positive, about what he sees as improvements there. But again, I go back to Charles and Mike's articles. There's a downside to a lot of these improvements. Yeah, there've been some great new hotels built on the boardwalk. The LGBTQ plus community has done some great things as far as improving the boardwalk area and some of the establishments, but it's not reaching a lot of the people. If you live in Asbury Park and you're working class, poor, African American, these developments aren't really helping much, are they?
I think here's the thing, right? And then anytime somebody talks glowingly about Asbury Park, and I'm one of them. I grew up in that area that Lisa was talking about. I didn't go to the Saint. I went to the Asbury Lanes. That was my place. I spent so many nights of my life seeing punk rock bands in Asbury Park. It means a lot to me. I'm a second generation Springsteen person. It means a lot to me. But whenever somebody says that, you have to ask them, where do you live? Because the vast majority of them will say they are not from Asbury Park. I think you mentioned working class and middle class, Sean. Who? I mean, it's the West Side, but that comes with a lot of problems that we've talked about before. The fact that it is segregated to be that way. The fact that if you look at where the affordable housing in the city has to be, it has to all go on the West Side because of some decades-old stigma about affordable housing. It just all comes down to the fact that the stakeholders in Asbury Park aren't the ones benefiting from all of this redevelopment. The rock venues are legendary. The nightlife is wonderful. The restaurants are really good. All that stuff is great. But when you talk about like a living, breathing community, that means that you have people that are paying into a community, that are investing in a community.
Right.
And largely they're not the ones benefiting. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have bought property in Asbury Park 25 years ago, if you saw the writing on the wall and said, oh, this is going to be a big one, good for you. Your property has quintupled in value. But, who can afford to live in Asbury Park as a working class or a middle class person these days? I mean, it has really started to be cool. It was, and this came out in the course of the reporting, is like historically, even, we keep talking about the West Side, even on the East Side, even on the eastern side, in the waterfront, it was diverse. There were middle class and lower class and working class people living on the eastern side of Asbury Park on the waterfront. Not anymore. I mean, that was all taken away as part of the redevelopment deals. I shouldn't talk with such a blanket term about it. I mean, there certainly are still some smaller homes or people who have been there for a long time. But who's to say what this looks like in 10 or 15 years? In the grand scheme of a city's lifetime, 25 years is nothing.
And also take into consideration that, as again, I'm more of the West Side reporter and less of the Bruce Springsteen fan that's on this podcast right now. But I can speak to that because just as a reporter, I know of the boss contributing to helping the West Side in ways that I cannot state on this podcast because of confidentiality, and I mean that as a compliment. And the reason I'm saying that's a problem is because all the millions of dollars that come in from the East Side, from that perception that you guys are talking about with the Saint, the lanes, and all that. What was it? Something like $4 million, maybe, so of all these millions have made its way to the West Side to help with infrastructure and building a park. And as you guys all know, the West Side has its own history. It's less rock, more jazz, more blues. There was rock. My dad is a rock musician, a blues guitarist that played at the Turf Club back in the 60s and 70s. And the Turf Club is one of the only things still standing because in 1970, when it's called the Uprising on the West Side, but a lot of people in the Jersey Shore area would just call it the riots when Asbury was on fire. All the white flight that happened after that, Ocean Township High School was formed. All the money left the West Side, and then over the last 2-3 decades now, the money's been coming back on the East Side. And to add to what Mike was saying, a lot of this is just perception. Because how come there isn't a vibrant club or vibrant restaurant that we the five of us on this roundtable right now all view as iconic to the city of Asbury Park, that we all have gone to go see an act on the West Side right there on Springwood Avenue, because of this perception of what the West Side is, and it's wrong. I just want to say that it's just that there's been a divestment on the West Side, to Mike's point and to our reporting, that the West Side is made for affordable housing, and all the businesses and all the venues go on the East Side, the other side of the track, the right side of the tracks, and that's still a problem. The 4 years I've been here at the Asbury Park Press, I'm from Monmouth County, though. I'm going to be 37 in August. I grew up in Monmouth County. So the idea that there's nobody that wants to do this on the West Side isn't true either. It just doesn't get the multi-million or multi-billion dollar investments that the waterfront redevelopment area has gotten. And it's frustrating because, again, I'm from around here. Everybody knows Bruce Springsteen is from around here between Asbury Park and Freehold. And I've seen that he cares about the West Side. I've seen other musicians care about the West Side, but it's this perception that you can't do it what the Saint did, what the Lanes did, what all the venues on Cookman is doing right now. You can't do that on Springwood because it's the hood or something like that, and it's just not. I pulled this up talking to Mike earlier. There was 0 deaths by firearm 2 years ago. There was 3 in 2025. And if we're all from the Jersey Shore, as sad as this may sound, 3 deaths by firearm isn't really news now, is it? But that's not a perception of some,
Right.
Violent urban decay or whatever that gets still applied to the West Side by detractors. And I just feel like that is part of this conversation, that we can't keep talking about these iconic buildings, Bruce Springsteen and all of this, when if the town was equal, 1, 2, 3 of these venues would be within walking distance of the train station, just in the other direction.
Absolutely. I'll just throw in quickly a little bit of historical note for Springsteen fans. The Turf Club that you mentioned, Clarence Clemens played there a lot before he joined the E Street Band, and Bruce talks about that in the new film that plays at the Springsteen Center that just opened last month. He talks about the West Side and what happened there. I highly recommend checking out that film when you go, if you go, because it's a part of the whole approach to American music that they're trying to do there, that Bruce is trying to do. Do not forget the West Side and its importance. In addition to everything else you said, Charles, that it's got a direct link to E Street history as well. And I know that, some of this has been private, as you said, but what we do know publicly, because it was announced about a year and a half ago, I think, we reported on it that Bruce and Patty have been a very strong supporter financially of the effort to reopen the Turf Club with the Asbury Park African American Music Project, I think is the official name of the organization that's behind that. And they
Yep,
did
Asbury.
announce,
Yeah.
yeah, they did announce, that there was a significant donation to that effort among the whatever else he's been doing privately. We do know about that. So yeah. Jumping back, since we're into history here, Daniel, go for it.
Yeah, well, a couple of things about what both Mike and Charles said. Go back to the beginning, and James Bradley, the founder, bans black people from the beach, saying that he's not prejudiced against black people. He would ban Italians as well. The reason being that he can't do business if we're going to have minorities on the beach. That's essentially what's being said today, is you can't sell a good condo if there are going to be minorities around and poor people around. And jump ahead to when Stephen Crane lived in Asbury, and he writes a story that creates a scandal of some working people parading in Asbury Park, and he said they looked like birds who had lost their way. There were no working people. Asbury Park, he said, makes nothing. So we're now in the sort of beginning of the 20th century, maybe. I think the point of taking back the casino, if you can do that, is to turn around the economy of Asbury Park. If you're going to take back the casino in order to sell the property to build more condominiums, leave it. Why do that? The reason to take back the casino or build up the convention hall, to me, is to figure out an economy where wealth starts getting distributed equally. And that includes Charles' suggestion of building on the west side. But I don't want a white tourist center on the west side any more than I want it on the east side. This is, as Bruce has said, a national problem. How do you run an economy where everybody gets some of the wealth? And that's the challenge to Asbury Park. And I'm hoping that this latest controversy will lead to really thinking about that. Not just do we want the old buildings, but what kind of a city do we want? What kind of an economy do we want?
Yeah. And as you said, Daniel, it's a problem that all of our communities in the U.S. have to grapple with because racism, newsflash, and economic issues are a problem across the board. So, just to go on the record specifically, we don't want to make this a case of like Asbury Park is this alien outlier in the U.S. that's having unique problems. It's just that a lot of them get amplified in certain ways, especially if you're a Springsteen fan and if you're someone who loves the Asbury Park area and its history. This is how it plays out there, but it's certainly playing out where I live and where everyone else lives in the U.S. in one way or the other. We have to grapple with these issues if we're going to move forward as a society, as a country as a whole.
Well, and part of the appeal of Bruce's early songs was that people recognized that city. It's a town full of losers. I'm busting out here to win, right? I mean,
Right.
He was describing a city that everybody knew. It just happened to be Asbury Park where he was going. And what he did, as you pointed out, Sean, was not run away finally, but come back and try to figure something out. And I think that remains the challenge for people who live in Asbury and care about it.
If I could, I have to preface this by saying I'm a Bruce guy. Like that's a thing I will say about myself. I'm glad he does a lot of he has been very vocal about the West Side, but I think there's room for him to talk about the stuff on the waterfront too. I mean, I don't mean certainly there are some people they would never say it, but I think they're expecting him to ride in like a knight on a white horse to save the casino and the convention hall. That's not going to happen. It would require hundreds of millions of dollars, and he has it clearly, but that nobody could recommend that as a wise investment. But you have a situation where this community is using the city, I should say, is using its reputation as like a real arts hub to promote itself. And the fact of the matter is that Bruce Springsteen of 1971 or 1972, what's he gonna do in Asbury Park today? I mean, yes, there's an art scene, but it's all owned by largely the same company. And the way these things work is, you piss off one bar owner you're not going to work in this town again. That's a thing that could happen. You know, he certainly couldn't live anywhere nearby on the salary of a starving artist. And I think there has to be some discussion from the arts community in general of like how to change this. And it's one thing to like write a social media post or whatever, but like actual organizing on the community level, getting involved in local politics, local government. I mean, that's how you really start to turn what is an arts community into like you sort of mesh it with the government and the way like an actual city runs, right? And it's more than that. It should be more than that. A place like Asbury Park could be not just an arts hub, but like an artsy city. And I think, and again, this probably goes back to these contracts that were signed 25 years ago. There's a real separation there. It's like you have all of this art stuff that goes on, and you use that as an excuse as to why you can charge an arm and a leg for a condo. You know, why you could go all this time without putting any money in the West Side. Why you could specifically redline affordable housing out of the nice area. All that kind of stuff is linked, and I think if the arts community as a whole gets involved and really organizes, capital O organizes at that kind of level, I think you could really see some pretty dramatic changes. My partnership with Charles here, Charles covers Asbury Park. I don't have much of a municipal beat, so I just kind of parachuted in with him to work on this. But I don't know. It's cool to see this level of excitement about the casino, but I don't know. I think it's probably going to require more. I mean, more than anybody. It's just my whole generation knows the casino as basically just an awning over the boardwalk, right? Convention Hall, I think, is a wild story. There's a reason we wrote about it at length, is because it's just it has become a money pit, due in no small part to Madison Marquette dragging their feet on doing a lot of the work, but it's a money pit. Those are just two historic buildings, and as we've talked about ad nauseum here, a city should be more than a couple of buildings, right? A community should be more than a couple of buildings. And I think if you have an arts community that gets together and talks about, here are the problems, here's what we need to be doing in Asbury Park, I think that can go a long, long way. I mean, I look back at that Bruce show at See Here Now a couple of years ago, like the kind of show that if he died the next day, you would go, you know what? He went out on top. I mean, and to my mind, you're never going to top that. The set list, the scene, the community, everything. I mean, it was an all-timer. But a lot of the little banter in between the songs is talking about, hey, it's great to see great to see everybody in Asbury Park. It's great what's become of Asbury Park from where it was. Let's take that energy and turn that into like, how do we make Asbury Park good for everybody, not just the people that are here going to a concert.
Right.
Can I
Yes,
weigh
Lisa.
in here, please? I 100% agree with you. I loved the Marilyn Schlossback quotes. I think she's right on. Marilyn Schlossback was a restaurant owner who was an early investor, and her comments about if we don't have a good school system or a good property tax base, and we don't feel like a community will always be seasonal, and that's a problem. All my friends who are music fans could not care less what happens to Asbury Park. They just want to come hang out where Bruce was. I can tell you this for a fact. They do not come out and support. They never did. Not for a long, long time. And to them, it's all something that happened in the past. So, I think an arts community is great. I question whether, and I think you raised this in one of the articles, whether these people who want the buildings to come back really care what else happens to the city at all. I think they just want to have that. That's kind of their pipe dream. And sure, I love those buildings. Like they're great. Who wouldn't love them? But I do a lot of work in the gun safety space, and I'm on the West Side all the time. I can tell you they do not give a patootie what goes on the other side of town, because they know they feel already like it's another game. They're going to get screwed again. That's all.
And no, that's totally a real perception too. There is a divide just in the Asbury Park sense, not the literal sense of East and West Side, but of the touristy Bruce Springsteen rock fans that come into town and the people that are here all year round. And to both Lisa and Mike's points, part of what Mike and I have just uncovered in our reporting and talking to people and just our combined fandoms, right, is that the boardwalk redevelopers will use art washing, for lack of a better term, to cover up the the lack of redevelopment or community that we haven't seen, right? They will use these spaces that are just empty in the casino and give artists a space one, two, three times a summer, and then say, "Hey, look at what we did." They'll give the artists the time to show lights on the Paramount and say, "Hey, look at what we did." But the five of us sitting here are talking about, imagine if the Paramount and Convention Hall were open all the time. Imagine if the West Side had venues that the rock and blues and jazz people could play at all the time. And just for people listening that might not actually know the distance between the Turf Club and Cookman, it's less than 2 miles. It is a very walkable distance especially on a nice summer night. So this is not some crazy thing we're talking about. We're talking about, especially people, in their 20s and 30s, if you're going out for a Friday, Saturday night, it is a very doable distance to have a plan to experience the city in all these places that we are talking about. And to not just use Bruce, because I think Bruce will need a bigger venue than Convention Hall or the Paramount these days. But I'm a pro wrestling fan. There was wrestling events all the time at Convention Hall. There's sporting events that could be happening there, bringing in more of these tourists. And to Lisa's point, a lot of these people don't care because there's nothing else that they promote that they care about. They come in to see the landmarks, the Bruce landmarks or the rock shows, then they leave. They go back to the train station and they leave. If there was a really ridiculously hot club like the Turf Club was in the 50s and 60s, a block away from the railroad tracks that they could walk to after the show on Cookman, the city would be in a much different spot. And this is something, I'm not on my soapbox talking about this. I'm just repeating what I have heard nonstop, not just as a reporter, but as a local Monmouth County man for my entire life, that it's just crazy that, we're on this pod right now. We're talking about all the same things. And the sad part is, if we release this and we put the timestamp, instead of July 2026, we made it 2016 or 2006, it would just be as relevant. It would be almost the same exact conversation. The only difference is Convention Hall would have been open. That's literally the only difference in this whole conversation.
I think, that's with Convention Hall and the casino. I mean, there's been so much chatter about, and not chatter, outright pushes for the city to take back those places. If I'm a taxpayer, right, if I'm somebody who cares about Asbury Park, who cares about the things that we're talking about here, why don't we use that money to invest in those kinds of programs, to invest in something on the West Side, to if you're going to pay a lawyer to try to rip up a deal, I don't think it should be for figuring out what to do with Convention Hall or the casino. It should be to figure out how to get more affordable housing near the beach, to try to figure out that kind of stuff, to try to figure out how to get more money in a school district. One of the things we point out in the story that genuinely was news to me when I learned it is that all of that development on the waterfront, and for people who may not know, the waterfront is not just right by the water. It's basically everything that you think of as Asbury, everything that I think of as Asbury, that I go to Asbury, from Grand Street down to the water, all the way to Deal Lake. All of that new development that has occurred doesn't pay a dime to the school district. And it's a school district that is struggling mightily. So if the city is going to pay for lawyers to rip up these deals and figure out how to get out of them so they can take back these old historic buildings that everybody loves, myself included, why don't we try to figure that stuff out too while we're at it? Because I think if we care about a city and a community really rising up, that's where you start. It's not the nice old buildings so we can have cool concerts again. It's that kind of stuff to make Asbury an affordable and a more diverse place to live, like it was for so much of its history.
Absolutely. And I don't want, I happen to know some of the people in the the preservation efforts. I don't think they're directly involved in some of the stuff we're seeing now with the Convention Hall politics, but I know that not everybody who's concerned about the preservation of these artifacts and buildings, they're also concerned about the other things you said, Mike. But it does come back to organizing, like you said, that there has yet to be a well-organized effort that takes on all of these issues in a way that makes sense and understands that, if you're catching hell on, say, the west side, you might not be as concerned, understandably, about the preservation of certain buildings because you've got your own stuff you need to deal with, and we need to figure out a way to support you in your efforts. And like, as I said, bring all these issues together into like a united, organized effort to truly save the city. As you said, saving a couple buildings is not the same as saving a city or a country while we're at it. But we could go on, but I know we're headed up against time here. Where do you guys think this is going to go with this call for the lawsuit? And meanwhile, it seems like the city administration is saying, well, we've got some plans. We can't tell you about it yet, but, stay tuned. Like, how do you think this is going to play out? If you have any idea of that, or are you just sitting back and waiting to see, like the rest of us, what's going on?
Well, it's hard to say because, as I said, when you asked me what's going on in Asbury, we're still kind of in the middle of it, and all I can do is point to the last report where the council is kind of weighing their options right now. We're kind of in the waiting game of, will Madison Marquette get those tax credits to fix up the Paramount and Convention Hall? And we should know that answer sometime this summer, whether that's in the next 2 weeks or the next month and a half. That's kind of where we are right now when it comes to we're still playing that waiting game. As far as the future of the casino, that is a loaded question because, not to be a parrot or sound like an echo, but it goes back to, okay, so if the city does take back the casino, what next? That's not really a clear-cut plan because there's not really a clear-cut plan at all right now. It is very much up in the air. The preservation effort has a lot to do with not just the music scene, but really the culture and identity of Asbury Park. These buildings mean a lot to people, not just in Asbury Park, but across New Jersey. And it's very much the identity of the city, pretty much what we were alluding to with how so many Bruce fans view Asbury Park. Those buildings are the face. Those buildings are what people kind of picture when they think of the boardwalk. They see Tony Soprano walking down the boardwalk and seeing those iconic buildings. It is just part of the identity. When people are showing up to these council meetings and complaining about big gray boxes being built across the town, they're comparing it to Convention Hall, to the casino, to the arcade, to all the historical buildings, the unique structures and architecture throughout the city. Right. So I don't want to completely downplay the importance of those buildings while I'm just raising awareness on a Bruce pod to the cultural and musical history of the West Side. Because again, Bruce is aware of that. He's supportive of it. And but those buildings, very much as vain as it might sound to some, looks matter in show business. And a lot of those bones of those historical buildings matter to the future of the city. Because if we, again, speaking as a voice for the community here, if the community loses those buildings, they lose part of Asbury Park. And that's not me exaggerating or being hyperbolic. People feel that. People really want to save these buildings. They want to see them alive again, and they want to see that success contributing to the entire city, because there's a lot of nuance here. Yes, not everybody cares, but there are so many people that do. Those 200 people that showed up last week to the city council meeting, I was saying to one of my sources earlier today, I believe at least 75% of them care about affordable housing. At least that much of them would love to see some charity or nonprofit operate out of one of the convention hall or casino once it's restored. So there's a lot of nuance here. There's a lot of people. There's people are more complex than just save the buildings and then I don't care anymore. But that's my long-winded Yeah, we are waiting to see if Madison Marquette gets those tax credits, if they fix up Convention Hall. The sad part of all of it is Convention Hall and Paramount is the priority. So we're just going to see what the city decides to do when it comes to the casino.
Now, I also have to ask, and forgive my naivete here, and certainly maybe I'm off base, but Madison Marquette signed a deal 25 or however many years ago, and the deal included a promise to preserve, upgrade those buildings, keep them safe essentially as part of the deal. They failed miserably on upholding that part of the deal. Now we're talking about giving them tax credits to do what they already promised to do and didn't. What kind of assurance do we have that those tax credits are going to be used the way they're supposed to be used?
So it's an interesting point, Sean. I think the important thing to remember with the Madison Marquette deal is we highlighted the phrase in the story very specifically, but it was under the terms of that contract, Madison Marquette had to use commercially reasonable efforts to get that work done. You could argue, and Madison Marquette has argued this, that it is not commercially reasonable to do much work to these 100-year-old buildings, and that is their position, is that we have used commercially reasonable efforts. Madison Marquette told us we've put a couple $1 million into Convention Hall. They would not tell us how much or what that kind of work entailed, and we're doing some more reporting on that now, kind of in the coming weeks and so. As far as the tax credits, I will say part of this is education, and I think that when we talk about tax credits, and I'm including myself in this, is I didn't really fully understand how these worked, but they are kind of designed to incentivize the developer to get stuff done, because the idea with the tax credits, especially in the program that Madison Marquette wants to use, is you don't get the tax credits till after you complete the work. And even though their tax credits are technically, yes, you will get a break on your taxes, really what they are is a commodity that you trade. So if Madison, assume for a moment that everything goes the way you would like it to, right? Madison Marquette gets these tax credits, and they're all good. The way that the process would work is that they do all the work on Convention Hall. They $100 million. Then they get these tax credits, and then they turn around and sell them to a different business. And
Okay.
they want to sell it for as high a price as possible to recoup their costs. And because it's a commodity, it loses its value the longer that goes on. So it
Okay.
actually incentivizes them to not just do the work, but get the work done faster. Now, if I'm the state and I am left making these decisions, who's to say they don't look at the last 25 years and say, is this a good faith operator here? Certainly the way that the program works is designed to get the work done. But I mean, they've lost a lot of love within Asbury Park. I mean, I think as far as what goes next, the thing that I'll be interested to see is on a wholesale level, what the relationship between Asbury Park and Madison Marquette looks like going forward. Because everybody's yelling and screaming about the casino, but when this gets sorted out, and it'll get sorted out eventually, the Convention Hall thing will be sorted out sooner rather than later, at least in broad terms, is like, a lot of these contracts were signed, as I said before, at a time when Asbury was needed investment. They needed investment very badly. They've been waiting 30 years for somebody to invest in Asbury Park, and they finally got it in the form of Asbury Partners and eventually Madison Marquette. But Asbury doesn't need to be giving things out anymore. The word is out on Asbury.
Right.
It's the hottest town on the Jersey Shore. You don't need to be giving out tax credits all the time. You don't need to be incentivizing developers to come here. And I think that'll be interesting to look at in the coming years. That as this next kind of phase of what Asbury Park looks like, whatever it is, I don't know what that'll look like, is what that development looks like in terms of a city that now has the power to say no. I don't want to be the guy who talks too much on the podcast, but I think about it all the time. Before I have this job that I have now, where I'm doing this investigative work, I covered marijuana legalization in the cannabis industry in New Jersey. I did that for a number of years when it was the hottest story going on. It was a lot of fun, and I think it's very interesting that Asbury to this day doesn't have any cannabis licenses, and I don't have an opinion on that matter. But it was done because if Asbury's going to have a cannabis business, you're going to do it on our terms. And it's because they know everybody would love to open a dispensary in Asbury Park. West Side, East Side, it doesn't matter. That thing will print money. So they know we have the power. If you're going to do something like this in our city, while some of our elected officials have doubts about it and have concerns about it, valid or not, it's going to be on our terms. So what happens when you take that energy and you turn it to the big wholesale development stuff, where you say, yeah, you want to come to Asbury Park, you want to build a bunch of housing here, you want to build mixed use buildings here, you want all that kind of stuff. If Asbury's all of a sudden in a position that they have the power, that completely shifts everything we know about what happened in the city over the last 25 years with redevelopment. Because everything was done while Asbury had no power, they had no leverage. And now the shoe's on the other foot, and I think it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. I don't know if I am not a lawyer, I just play one on TV. I don't know if they have the power to really rip up a 25-year-old agreement and say, actually, we want you to build affordable housing, we want you to put money in the school district, that kind of thing. But whatever that next phase is, when you learn the lessons of the past, and now, to their credit, the revitalization of the waterfront is, in terms of tourism dollars, in terms of redevelopment for what it was, is an unmitigated success, and you have money coming in. Now, how do you use that leverage that you've gained to figure out what the next phase of the city looks like?
Yeah, I think that's the excitement of this moment. The convention hall and casino opens the bag, and people can change how the city works. Contracts can be broken. Working with developers can end. What Mike was just saying and what Charles was just saying is that the wealth can be distributed in a different way. And that's why it's almost less important whether the casino is standing as that you've got 200 people at a city board meeting and you've suddenly got people thinking about the city and going, wait a second, this isn't what we intended. So, to my understanding, the developers are something like a third. Mike and Charles may know this better. They have 2/3 more building they could do on the waterfront. They've only begun. And it's the time, as Mike just said, where Asbury can go, oh, wait a second, maybe we don't want it packed cheek to cheek there. We want to redistribute things. And their reporting will get some credit if it does change.
I feel like I'm harping on the organized thing, right? I'm like, my day job is as a reporter. My volunteer work at night is an organizer with the News Guild. So I always have that hat on a little bit. But I mean, if you think about the issues facing the West Side, you think about the issues facing the waterfront. I mean, it's ripe for organize. It's ripe for people to rise up and realize, like, hey, your issues are our issues are your issues, and we are stronger together. And if you don't get in, we're leaving without you. And that kind of energy, bringing into local politics, into local government, but really just into a community, I think can really shift the way that we talk about these issues, and making it less about the city and Madison Marquette, the city and Asbury Partners, and more about the community of Asbury Park and Asbury Partners, the community of Asbury Park and Madison Marquette. And I realize that makes those two companies out to be villains, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. I think, like I said, as a waterfront redevelopment project, it's an unmitigated success compared to what it was 30 years ago. But you could certainly make the argument, and many people have, that the community's point of view and interest was not included or not given any real importance in those discussions 25 years ago.
Right.
And I think that's where the big change could happen, with a lot of organizing on the community level.
Well, for whatever it's worth, Letters to You will continue to cover this, because it's important stuff, not just for Asbury Park, not just from a Springsteen fan's perspective, but just as citizens of a country, because as Daniel's book and as you guys have pointed out, this has national implications, as well as just what happens in Asbury Park with some buildings. And I think it's fitting that, and also we will continue to support as groups emerge, as organizing efforts emerge. Please let us know at Letters to You if you're out there trying to think this stuff through and work on it, because we want to support, any positive efforts to improve Asbury Park the way it should be. I just want to point out as we close up, I want to thank everybody for participating in this. Number one, it's so great to have you all together here. We are definitely going to let our readers know how they can stay connected with your work. Charles and Mike, we're going to let people know how they can get a copy of Daniel's book if they don't have it already. Keep checking out Lisa's work here at Letters to You and elsewhere. We have links to her all the time, so you can easily connect with Lisa and her work. But again, I want to thank you all for participating in this. I want to point out that we recorded this conversation on Woody Guthrie's birthday. So I think it's fitting to close with two little quotes from Woody. The first, of course, is absolutely, "This land was made for you and me." And the second I'll throw in from Pretty Boy Floyd, "Through this world I've wandered, I've seen lots of funny men. Some will rob you with a six gun and some with a fountain pen." And as Bruce said, as he closed his recent tour, stay hard, stay hungry, stay alive, and stay involved. Thanks again, everybody. Take care.